Well, welcome everybody. Good morning. Thank you for spending your sunny, nearly springtime Saturday morning with us. So today we are going to be painting a very special piece called Hope. It's a seascape. The original artist is a wonderful lady called Victoria Obolensky on our team. She paints seascapes day in, day out. This was the last seascape she painted before the first lockdown. So she named it Hope because she could sort of see something coming and she didn't know quite what it was going to be. So it's quite a special piece to us. I believe everybody's had a kit that's landed through their letterboxes. And if you're just getting acquainted with what's in there, in fact, you might prefer the overhead view for this. So you can see you've got a face-on view of me, and then you've got another view that says Masterpiece Overhead. And if you prefer that view, you can just right-click and pin it, and it will make it nice and big. So you see that. And I'll actually see if I can turn it so that it's the right way up. Yeah, that's better, isn't it? Perfect. So if you've got that view, I'll just get you comfortable with what you would have found in your kit. So you would have had a canvas board with a strip of masking tape and some pencil marks ready drawn in for you. You'll have a couple of paintbrushes, and it would be really helpful to have a little jar of water to wash your brushes in. You should have a sponge and 6 paints and a palette. And I've just jumped ahead and dosed out some of my paints onto my palette. You can do that, or you can work straight out of the tub, entirely up to you. So in terms of other bits that you might like, just a jar of water and a sheet of kitchen roll.
Can everybody put themselves on mute, please, if there's background noise? And if you want to ask any questions, just take yourself off mute. Thank you.
I'm on an iPad, so I haven't got a clue how to pin an individual picture. So if anyone knows how to do that, that would be great.
I think you double with 2 fingers tap on the image, and then it should give you a few options, or it might have a 3 dot. Yeah.
Okay, but how do I pin both of you though? So...
Oh, you really want my overhead. You'll get bored of looking at my face pretty quick.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Brill, anybody else, any questions in terms of the materials you might need? Just the contents of your kit, a scrap of kitchen roll and a jar of water. And then we'll make a start. I've got a scrap piece of paper here as well, just to show you a few bits, but it's the canvas board is on the left and a scrap on the right. So we're going to make a start whenever you're ready. And at Masterpiece, for anybody who didn't come along to our sketching workshop a couple of weeks ago, we are all about mindful painting. So we teach painting as a way to relax and unwind rather than to try and drive you to a certain outcome with your painting. So just as part of your practice today, I would really love for you to really detach from your piece. Don't feel emotionally invested in it at all. It ends up beautiful, great. It ends up less than beautiful, also great. The benefit of spending this time together today is an hour where we're just looking at some beautiful colours with a group of amazing women, getting creative. And for some of us, that might be the first time we've done that in possibly years, months, whatever the case may be. So we'll make a start unless anybody has any questions before we get going. And Stella, if you're going to be DJ, I'll give you like an instruction, and then if you want to play the music, that'd be lovely as we start to paint. There are 5 steps to this piece. You've got them on your written instructions, and you have got the video tutorial pre-recorded in our app as well. So if you feel like today's going a bit fast and you wanted to spend a bit more time over it, just remember you've got another video tutorial that you can pause, resume at your own pace. So take this class.
Zena, can you just explain how people access that app? I mean, there's on this how to, there's that little I forgot what you call these.
QR code.
QR codes, thank you. So you can just zap that, right? And
Yeah,
it will bring
yeah.
the app up. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So you can just point your camera at that and it will bring up the app. But if you don't really like QR codes, the URL is just underneath. It's just app.masterpiece.studio. Type that into your browser and the app will pop up. And then you're away. Right, should we get started? Okay, cool. So this is a piece of two halves, really. You've got an absolutely glorious bright blue sky and wispy clouds in your top half, right the way down to that top line of your masking tape. And then beneath the masking tape, you've got a beautiful seascape, a crashing wave, and your beach. And the role of the masking tape is to help give us a really nice, clean horizon line. So it's been placed at the horizon for you. If it's a bit wonky, you want to straighten it out, you want to move it down, anything like that, I would do that now before we start. But I'm quite happy with where mine is. So taking our paints, and if anybody's still working their way into their paints, they do twist off. They twist off to the left, and a nice gentle grip on the lids is actually really helpful. Don't clamp down too hard. But we're going to be starting with our light blue, our dark blue, our white, and our black. But if you have unscrewed all of your paints, really helpful. So you've got easy access.
Could I just ask a question, please?
Hi, Wendy.
Hi, my canvas doesn't have all of those lines on it, just the ones between the masking tape. So it's not mirroring yours. It doesn't have the pencil lines for the clouds.
Yeah, no, that they're all hand drawn. So
Yeah.
I've just given myself a few extra lines this morning.
That's all right. Thank you. That
No
clears
worries.
up. Cheers.
Mine, as soon as we do the first coat on the sky, anyway, those cloud lines are, they're all right. Any more questions? No. Anybody? Yeah, bro. Everybody's in the paint's good. Are we okay audio-wise? Yeah, grand. Okay, so
I just want to answer Svetlana because she's saying, should we see something else or just the lady? So just you, if you can just explain quickly to Svetlana about the masterpiece overhead, please.
Yeah, for sure. So hi Svetlana. So there are lots of participants on the call. One of them, you can see me, Masterpiece Creative Studios. That's my face on view. But then there's another participant called Masterpiece Overhead. And for that, you're just seeing my tabletop. And that's the view you really want. So if you double tap on that or right click on that, you can pin it and get a full size view. Right, so the sky we'll start with first. Now, we start with just a lovely blue base coat. You can use either of your blues or a mix of the two. And I generally use mostly the cyan blue, which is the light blue, with just a little drop of the darker blue. And a bit of water just from your jar on the palette, just to loosen it up. And we'll mix that together. You can use whatever ratio you like. It's just the base coat, so it's not going to matter too much. You just want something nice and watered down that you can really very quickly brush onto your board without much thought. So you can see, hopefully overhead, how this is working. That blue shade that I've found can be any blue that you like. And we're just going to fill in all the way down. I'll show you all the way down to the masking tape, just down to here. And don't worry if you paint over the masking tape, that's exactly what it's for. It's there to protect the horizon line underneath. So if DJ Stella would like to play us something, we'll just spend a moment filling in our blue sky. It shouldn't take more than about a minute.
It's coming up.
Woohoo! So the benefit of this being really watered down is that it's going to dry really fast and we can work straight on top of it. So Don't apply too much paint here, nice thin coat. Here we are. So you can see how rough mine is. Really wouldn't worry too much about that. You'll hardly see this layer once we start to build on top. And as soon as you're happy you've filled in your sky, you can let me know by just holding your paintbrush up to the camera, just like that, and I'll broadly know when everybody's ready for the next. Stella, I'm not sure if there is music just yet.
Oh, I've been playing it. Sorry, you can't hear it?
Not my end.
Can everybody else hear it? No. Oh dear, sorry. It's so lovely. I'm enjoying it. I'll try again. Apologies. I'm not sure why.
No.
Try again.
Wendy, well done. I think that's a signal. Thank you. Jacqueline and Mark, looking good. Anybody else feeling done? Sheena's done, ready to go. That is the perfect spot for painting, Sheena. You've got so much natural light there. Avril's done. Abba's done. Brilliant. Belinda's done. Alrighty. We're looking good. Good, good, good. Okay, I think enough of us are broadly there. I'll show you this next bit. So we have broadly painted in just a blue base. And what we're going to start to do is work in on top. Now you can work with your sponge for this bit. I really like the sponge, but if you've enjoyed working with the brush, feel free to stick with that. But what we're effectively doing is we're going to start building in our first layer of clouds. Now the clouds are almost entirely white, but they've got just the teeniest, tiniest drop of black, and be really, really sparing with this drop because the black's really powerful. It will turn the white very dark very quickly. So there's just the tiniest drop of black on your brush in that well with mostly white mixed together, and you're going to have a nice off-white, just ever so slightly grey. And with that, I'm going to use my sponge. So I'm going to take some of that paint, just a tiny bit on the sponge, and I'm going to use it to sweep in my first layer of clouds. And if you want to stay true to Victoria's piece, you can see that the cloud cover is a bit heavier right down at the horizon line and over to the top right corner of the piece. So you might start there and then work your way in, but you don't have to marry hers up perfectly. You can absolutely make this piece your own. So I'm going to work from the bottom corner, and I'm just going to start to sweep in.
To ask, is your brush wet?
My sponge is wet.
Sponge wet. Your sponge, yes, sponge is wet. Okay, thank you.
It's not soaking, it's not dripping, but it's just got, it's not bone dry. So I dunked it into the jar and then I rinsed it out. And I'm going to start to take my paint with it, and I'm going to start to blend it in over the top. Now, the lovely thing about working with the sponge is it naturally starts to blend with the blue that you've painted in underneath. So you're going to get some real subtlety in colour. And the other thing that's brilliant about the sponge, as opposed to, say, a brush, is you can't control it to the same extent. And with a natural scene like a seascape, when you're painting clouds and crashing waves, there is nothing all that structured about it. It's really quite random. It's quite spontaneous, and working with something like a sponge helps get you that sense of spontaneity where you can't quite control it in the same way. So before we kick back into the music, I'll just explain that for this bit, I'm going to work from sky to clouds, to sky to clouds, using that technique until I feel like my sky is there. And for that, all I'm going to do is I'm going to flip between shades of blue through back to shades of white. And as I go, I'm just building up more and more variance and interest in my sky. So if we are listening to music for a couple of minutes, that's what we'd be doing, flipping between blues and whites with our sponge or with our brush until we feel like we've got a sky that we like the look of. Any questions before we dive back into the music? All right, off we go.
Okay, I'll try again.
Yeah, sorry.
Let
Is
me
it
know.
white or white with black?
So you want your first few coats of cloud to have a little touch of black in there, just so that it's an off-white. You'll work at the last step on the sky, we're going to work some pure white over the top just to give the clouds a bit more sparkle. But for now, work with that slightly off-white and interchanging in with your blues. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, off we go.
Can you hear this now?
Not yet.
Oh my goodness, I'm sorry, everybody. I'm just having problems this morning with the audio, sharing it. I have no idea why.
Do you want me to put something on?
Yeah, if you can.
Absolutely.
I don't know why this isn't working.
Not to worry. Technology is unpredictable. Can you hear that, Stella?
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe turn it down a touch.
How's that?
Yeah, that's good.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully you're making progress with your sky. Just coming back to that question we had earlier in terms of working with the pure white. So as soon as you feel that you've got a base that you're keen on, and Stella, I think you're, yeah.
I'm sorry, yes, I've stopped now.
Let me sort this music out. As soon as you've got a sky base that you're starting to feel happy with, you can start to introduce a bit more of the pure white on top, just in parts. And now this is basically where the sun is striking the cloud the most. So in Victoria's, you can see it slightly kind of in the center of the piece, in the center of the sky, just here. And at the top of the piece. You'll notice that the clouds are slightly more grey under the belly of the cloud and slightly more white at the top of the cloud, and intuitively that sort of makes sense because that's where the sun is striking the cloud the most and casting a shadow under the belly of the cloud. So if you start to pick up on some of those variances and those details, you can start to build those in on top of the base that you're starting to build. Now, the cloud does, the sky doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. We're going to turn our attention to starting to build up the sea, but that's not to say that the sky is finished. As we work, we might return to it, we might build up more layers, we might respond to it in a slightly different way. But all we're doing at this stage is starting to almost sketch out the piece with paint. So I'll give us just a couple more moments here just to add in a few of those final touches, any last highlights of white, and then I'll move us on to the beginnings of the sea. Music's going to kick back in.
I think I fixed it, Zena. Let me try again.
Okay, cool, brilliant. All yours.
No, if it works. Can you hear that?
Not just yet.
No.
Okay, I haven't fixed it then. You go ahead.
Do you want me to resume?
Yes, please, you carry on. I thought it had been fixed, but
Not to worry. If you do get it, just let me know. All right, last 10 seconds here, ladies. Okie dokie. All right. So let's tune back in for this next instruction. But like I say, don't worry at all if your sky is not feeling done just yet. You will be able to come back to it, but I'll just move us along so that those of you who are ready can see what's coming next. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to start to pull back my masking tape that's fixed at the back of the piece. You want to do this slowly and carefully. If you go a bit too fast, you might just find that some of the paint spreads underneath, but it's not the end of the world. We are going to paint into that bit now. And you want to keep hold of your masking tape. We don't want to scrap it. So as you've pulled it up nice and carefully, we are then going to reattach it, this time protecting the base of the sky that we've just made. so that again, we're just getting that nice clean horizon. So I'm taking that same strip of tape and now I'm placing it at the base of my sky, so over the top of my paint. Now my paint is really dry at this point, but if yours is still wet, don't worry about this step because you don't want to lift up your wet paint. If yours is nice and dry like mine, we're going to cover the sky with the tape, and we want to be really careful to see a little bit of blue poking out underneath the tape, just to make sure we've absolutely covered only just the sky. If we're overlapping with the sea, then we're going to leave a little white gap, and we don't want that. So I've reattached my tape. I've got a little bit of blue poking out underneath, and now I'm ready to start to paint my sea. So for the sea, we're going to start by painting in the really dark blue deep sea section behind the wave. So we're going to paint that dark blue deep section behind the wave. Then we're going to paint the wave itself, the lovely white marbling at the front. And then finally, we're going to paint in the sand. So we're working from the horizon down to the bottom of the base. So for that dark part of deep sea, we're going to work again with a blend of blues, but this time just favouring the dark blue a little bit. So I'm going to take mostly dark blue and just a tiny bit of my lighter blue, mixing it together. And a bit like with the sky, the first coat is nice and loose and messy, not worrying about it too much. And I'm just painting from the horizon down to the top of the wave. And this is just my base coat. So I'm not thinking too hard about what I'm doing just yet. Just a watered down, nice thin coat of cobalt blue, mixed with a tiny bit of the lighter blue, the cyan blue. And then as we did with the sky, this base is what we're now going to build up on top of with more depth and variety of colour. So you might want to build in a bit more of the light blue on top of this base, introducing a tiny bit of white, but being sure to keep it a nice contrast from the sky. To help me do that, I'm just going to introduce a tiny bit of black into my blue to paint in right up at the horizon line. And that's just going to ensure that the top of my horizon from the sea's perspective is always going to end up darker than the bottom of the sky. So you'll have that nice contrast. So it's just a tiny bit of the black introduced at the horizon point over the top of my blue. And that is just going to darken it all up at the horizon and give me a nice contrast to my sky. But beyond that, I'm going to start working in light blues and some whites. As we paint, I'll pop the music back on. But before we do, does everybody feel that they understand how to paint in the deep, dark blue sea? Yeah? Alrighty. Tuning in for some music. Just as we're starting to build up that deep blue sea, I'll just point out an extra step that you can introduce if you feel ready, and that's to work your white on top of your dark blue sea in very subtle W kind of shapes, creating a sense of crashing waves in the distance. So we want these to be really subtle so it doesn't end up looking too cartoony. So it will just be towards the back, just little wavy lines, really subtly. My paint is still wet, which is good because now my white waves are blending into the paint beneath. But if you would like to introduce some of that, you're just working with pure white over the top of your slightly wet blue in these subtle W wavy lines. Nothing too literal so that we don't end up with anything too cartoony there. If you're not sure on that step, just shout. And we'll just have the last moment here. So last few seconds, and then we will turn our attention to the crashing wave. And again, as you're sort of starting to finish that step, just keeping in mind that really all we're doing so far is building in foundations throughout the piece. You'll return to every step and you'll add more details and change things and adapt things, but what we're doing at this point is just starting to sketch out the piece. So I'm going to flip back to my sky for a moment, just to allow you to finish. And then we will move on to the crashing wave. Now, if for whatever reason you ever find that you've made a mistake, for example, I managed to get a bit of green into my sky, the solution to that is to just get a nice clean brush with a touch of water in there, dilute it down, and then use some kitchen roll just to absorb some of that back up, and it's as good as new. So there's a little tip. If you go wrong at any point and you think, oh, I'd just like to kind of tidy up that blemish, just dilute it down with some water and then mop it up with some kitchen roll. If it's too far gone and it's had enough time to dry, not to worry. At that point, you can very easily just paint in clean on top, and it will be again as good as new. So there's my tips in case you ever have a repair job on your hands. All right, so next stop is that gorgeous crashing wave. Now, for this part of it, you might want to swap over to your thinner brush. Up to you. If you work with your bigger brush, you'll have a much more impressionistic, looser painting, which you might really enjoy. But if you want to try and get in some of those finer details, then your small brush will be your friend. So for the crashing wave, you'll notice that there's a sort of greenish, sea green colour coming through. And we achieve that by mixing our dark blue with a tiny bit of green and perhaps a little bit of white. And what we'll start to do following along with Victoria's piece is, again, as we've learned, we'll start by painting in a very rough, very watery base coat in that sea green, just the crashing wave at this point. And again, we'll use that as our foundation for us to build on top of. Now the sea green part of the crashing wave is over to the left of the piece. Over to the right, there's a little kiss of the green at the top of the wave, but then beyond that, it's mostly going to be your whites. So to give your whites section a bit of a base to work on, because of course, if you paint white over a white board, you're not going to see much of anything. what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some of my light blue, very, very watered down, and just paint that in with some white as my base for my white crashing wave to come in on top of. So I'm really purely just doing this as a base coat for my white to sit on top of, so that you get little flecks of blue showing up underneath, but really not much. And so I don't want to use too much paint here. I just want as little paint as I can get away with, just to stain the board. And then beyond that, I'm just using water to spread it. And in my mind, I'm just remembering that this blue area isn't really blue. It's going to end up white. It's just a base for the foam. So to recap, we had the sea green for the crashing wave, and we're just staining our canvas boards with the smallest amount of light blue paint we can get away with, spread with plenty of water, and that's where our foam is going to come in over the top. So you can paint this right the way through to the lip of the wave, and then we'll pause there. And so I will put the music back on for us for a moment, just so you can achieve that. Any questions before the music kicks back in? Sheena? You fine? You might be on mute, my love.
Can you just go over the base of the waves again with the blue?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd done my emerald green for the crashing wave, but then beyond that little section over on the left and the little touches of green over the lip of the wave, the rest of this piece down to the sand is practically almost entirely white. But we don't want to paint white onto a white board. We want to see a little bit of the blue kind of shining through underneath. So what I did was I mixed my light blue with a touch of white, and then I put as little of it as I could onto the board, and I just used pure water from my jar to spread it so that you have the thinnest coat you can manage there. You're just really staining the board blue so that the foamy wave over the top has got something to play with and react to. Any more questions before the music kicks back in? Lovely, okay. So if you're ready for the next step, and not to worry if you're not, because I'll go back over it. But if you are ready for the next step, you've painted in your emerald green, and you've stained the marbling, the lip of the wave with a light blue. all we'll be doing next is we'll be taking some pure white and we'll be working that in over the top to create some of the detail in the wave and into the front of the marbling. So your first coat of this can be quite light, but then the more confident you start to feel with where you've placed it, you can actually start to apply it really quite thick and almost create the texture of the crashing wave onto the part of the waves where you can see that crashing foam kick in. And to create that texture, you just sort of dot quite thick areas of white into the board. And that's going to achieve that versus using the softer sweeping watered down strokes that you might include for more of the marbling. So if you are at that stage, feel free to start building in that detail. You might also like to build in some extra layers of that emerald green and maybe adding some variety to that with a bit more of the dark blue, a bit more of the light blue, so that you've got a nice deep colour in that wave, but letting the that greenish tone shine through is a lovely touch. So just to recap this step, we're just adding definition and colour to the greenish part of the crashing wave. And we're starting to work pure white in for the marbling that sits in front of the wave. And we're using a combination of thick paint marks where the wave is very active and crashing versus very soft, loose strokes of paint for the marbling at the front, which is much gentler, working again all the way up to the line where the sea starts to meet the sand. Any questions about this section of the piece? All good, okay. Music coming in. Lovely. So I'll show you this next step just for anybody who's there. And again, just kind of reiterating that all of what we've done so far really is just a base coat. We'll work back over the top of absolutely everything to refine it. But if you are ready, the next step would be the sand at the front. Now, for the sand, you're working with the yellow ochre that's in your kit, mixed with white, and you can incorporate a tiny bit of the blue and even the green if you want to, just to almost create a kind of brownish colour within it. If you do that, work really carefully, so don't incorporate too much, just a touch. Mostly it's the yellow and the white. And for this bit, I quite like, again, working with my sponge, but you could work with your bigger brush, however you'd like. And you have probably guessed the formula, but we always start with that watered down base that we then apply on top of. And this is coming right the way up to the lip where the end of the crashing wave is, that base coat. And then we'll work over the top with more detail. So for anybody just tuning into this step, you can work with your sponge, you can work with your big brush. We're just making a sandy colour that we've done by mixing there's something interfering with my overhead. I think that's back. Real. That sandy colour, which was the yellow, the white, and the tiniest little bit of a green and a blue, just to create like a brownish undercolour. And as with the piece overall, we're painting in a really quick, watered down base coat that we can build on. And what you'll notice with Victoria's version of this piece, she has quite a dark section of sand at the point where the wave is receding back from the beach, because the sand there is wetter. It's just been drenched by that crashing wave, and she's getting that extra wetness across. So if you wanted to include that detail, all you'd do is you would include a bit of the black in with that yellow that you've made, that sandy yellow, and you'd create a shadow under the front lip of the wave, like that. And you'd incorporate some of that darker sandy colour just where you imagine that slightly wetter sand might have reached up into, just to get that across. Just a bit darker there. And at this stage, the stage is set effectively for this piece. The foundations are there. So what I'll do, just to show you, is I'll pull back my masking tape, which hopefully will have done its job of protecting the sky from the sea. With a lovely, nice, clean horizon there. That's worked well. So I'll hold that up to the camera in case you can't quite catch that. So you're seeing that nice clean horizon there. You're seeing the full foundation of the piece done. And at this point, if I was painting on my own, I'd probably go and make myself a cup of tea and stretch my legs and let it dry off a bit. Because when your painting dries, the pigment in the paint oxidizes and the colors change ever so slightly. So colors like white in particular feel this phenomenon a lot. You might have painted it, it looks perfect to you, and then you've let it dry, you've come back, and the white has lost some of its radiance. That's very, very natural, very normal. So once it's dry, you can look at it afresh and decide, okay, where do we go from here? How do I start to build and refine? So I would come back in over my sky. I'd come back in and add detail to my crashing wave and to my sand. And there's nothing to say that you ought to have all of that done in one sitting. The paints that you're working with do reseal, And your brushes can be washed and dried, your palette can be washed and dried, and you could always come back to it another day. So don't feel by any means that you are meant to have delivered and it's meant to be done, because very few artists will finish a piece in one sitting for lots of good reasons. And we're remembering that really this experience is about taking the opportunity to relax, unwind, get away from our scrolling habits, and hopefully create something beautiful. And there's absolutely no judgment otherwise. But I'll just pause there. We've got about 5 minutes left together. Are there any questions or anything that you didn't quite get hold of that you'd like me to go back over whilst we're all together?
How did that time go so quickly? I can't believe it.
That means you've been having fun. That's what it's all about. So we're at Masterpiece, we talk a lot about creative flow. So that feeling of losing track of time that you get when you found your flow, when you're totally immersed in something, when that thinking brain has switched off and the feeling brain is free to play. So if you felt like the time has flown by, that is music to my ears.
I had trouble mixing.
Yeah.
So I put, getting the original paints into the circular dips.
Yeah.
And then I just couldn't get the brush dry enough to not, so I've got literally it's all mixed together.
Yeah.
I didn't see how you did it because that palette is slightly off to the left. So,
right. Well, let me.
So each time you say you were mixing white with the blue.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got a tiny bit of blue in the white. But I mean, I just really struggled to keep them clean. The original colours clean. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. So you've got a few options for that. The first most important thing is imagining I was going to work into this empty well, and I was going to blend, say, imagine this is my original pot of blue with my original pot of white, just pretend.
Yeah.
My first tip would be to always work with the lighter colour first. So in this case, I would take the white out and I put it in the well. And I would twist off my brush to just get some of that excess paint off the brush and into the well.
Yeah.
And at that point, I would wash my brush in my jar. And I'm actually rubbing the bristles against the floor of the jar because that's starting to break up and loosen off.
Okay, yeah.
And then at that point, just to check that I've done it well enough, I will brush the brush against the kitchen roll. Yeah. And just check that the water's coming through clear. And that's when I know that my brush is really clean. And if it's not, which often it isn't, I'll go back in and I'll wash it again and then check it. And then what I do is I'd introduce the darker colour, mix that in. And then again, that habit of twisting the brush to get the excess paint off into the well, and then washing quite vigorously at the base of the jar, and then drying and checking against my kitchen roll.
Yeah. And then when you were making it into a wash,
yeah,
do you add it into the little pot, the well, or I think that's...
Yeah, no, so I'll show you on my scrap. So let me move this out. So you've got options. Option 1, if you know that you want that whole well to be quite watery, imagine all you were going to use that colour for was that watery base. Then, and let's imagine I'm using this well, the one that we just mixed together. Option 1 is I dip my brush into my jar of water but I would be sure that my jar of water is actually quite a fresh jar. Mine's now like a very murky green because I've used it loads. So I would tip out my water, get some fresh water so it's nice and clean. Let's pretend this water's nice and clean. I would dip my brush into the well, and then I would wring the water out into the space with the paint, and again with that twisting motion. And that's just dropping off some water into the well that I can then mix, and that's going to create me a really watery paint that I can then wash with. That's option one. Or option two, imagine I'm going to use this green. I think I've got paint on my face, that's great. And I don't want to water the whole thing down because I want to use some of the green for a thicker coat later. So in that case, what I do is I would apply some of the green to the board and then use water onto the board to spread it.
Okay, no, that's great, thank you.
Very welcome. And if you're finding that your little pots of paint are quite dirty now, just get some clean kitchen roll and pull out from the pot some of the dirty colour. So in my case, say I wanted to get rid of that blue that I've gotten into my white, I might just mop that bit up and it might just reveal some cleaner white underneath. Those are really good questions, actually.
Yeah. I think that's where I was getting a bit lost, you know, not having done art for like 40 years. So
brilliant. Well, I'm glad the day was the day you picked, and don't let that knock you back. Even if you just used shades of blue and applied the technique, you'd end up with a really lovely piece. So it doesn't have to match the colours exactly. Use what you've got.
Cheers. Thanks. I've hogged the questions a little bit, sorry.
No, I'm sure everybody appreciated those, actually.
That was it. Jocelyn asked exactly what I was going to ask.
Oh, good. Any more questions like that? Any little tips like that?
Oh, just a quick question. I took off the masking tape and the horizon line, some of the paint must have gone underneath, so it's not a clean line anymore. What's the best way to correct that?
Do you mind holding it up for me? This is looking beautiful. Okay, brilliant. So so it's your sky you're trying to bring back. So if I were you, I'll do the same on my piece. I would either, if your tape's still handy and it still has a clean bit, you could reapply it to the to covering your sea, protecting your sea, and revealing the part of sky that you wanted to bring the definition back into. And if you're going to do this option, just be sure to really rub the tape onto the board, because the heat of your finger will reactivate the stickiness. So if you do take this approach, and I'll give you an alternative, we're sticking the tape back on, protecting the sea this time because we want to just recover some of the sky, and we're rubbing our finger on the tape to get the glue to reactivate and heat back up. And then, believing that the tape is going to protect our sea, we would use probably just some pure white, so it's quite rich, quite a thick color, maybe a bit of your blue and a bit of black potentially in there if you wanted to. And then I would paint back over the part of your sky where the sea kind of came in and infiltrated that a little bit, and you're going to clean it up that way. Because the sea color was quite dark, you might find you need a couple of layers of this, and that's absolutely fine. Just let the first layer dry and then paint it back in again. But if you did do that, you'd let it dry completely, you'd pull the tape back, and you should have cleaned up your skyline. If you've lost faith in the tape, or the tape was thrown away or anything like that, you can do it the good old-fashioned way, which is just to take your thin brush and take your sky color and just carefully paint back in yourself, just to tidy up and get rid of those little blemish marks. I've done that with pure white just so you can see it on screen, but I'm going to smudge that out now. There you go. Do either of those, which do you think you'll do?
I'm trying them.
Excellent.
I have a bit of the tape, so I can't put it all the way across,
No.
but I'm just doing it in stages. So
yeah, nice, careful brushwork, couple of layers, and it'll be good as new. And then you can always reintroduce your sponge to like spread it back into your sky, so that you don't have like a line of color that doesn't make sense with the rest of your sky work, if that makes sense.
great, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Any questions? Wendy,
Would anybody like to share their creations so far?
I'd love to see. Here's my base coat. Ta-da! Anybody else feel brave? Ah, Belinda.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful. Wendy, that's wonderful.
Wow.
Catherine, be brave. We saw the top bit. There you go. Brilliant.
Amazing.
Wow.
These are great.
That's
Oh,
wonderful, Gina.
produced within an hour.
Yeah.
Jacqueline, amazing. Jacqueline, were you sitting outside there? Oh, I can't hear you. Hang on. I'll ask you to tell me. Yeah, you were. Lovely.
Amazing, amazing. Well,
Oh, look at that. Just very cool.
we could all hold up our pictures to the camera and take a quick picture if you wanted to, Stella.
Yeah, that would be great, actually. I can do that, but I was going to ask everyone to, well, let's do that first. And then, amazing. And then I was going to ask everyone if they could take a picture of it and put it in the group, because that would be lovely to see everyone's in the groups as well. I didn't get very far because then I got into technology issues. I got this far. So I've decided, that's it. I just did the sky, first one. I decided to stop and then play back the recording and then do it in time. So what I'll do is I'll send everyone the recording as well, so you can have that and you can refer back to it. And then, as Zena says, there's the app. Those of you who may have joined late, there's an app that goes alongside the kit, where you have the original artists running through the directions as well. So it's all on this here. Yeah,
absolutely.
That we sent. Yeah, if you've got any questions, just pop it in the group and we'll answer that too. But have you all had a good time? Did you enjoy that for a Saturday morning? It's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great.
It's lovely.
Glad.
Really, really nice new way.
Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, we could have gone on for a long time. You know, we've had Zena booked for an hour. Her time is valuable, so we only had her booked for an hour. But like I say, we have the recording, so we can then go back and refine. And maybe you'll come and do this another time with us again, Zena. Maybe we'll do another image in a couple of months, 2-3 months.
Can I just ask one quick question? Just one final question.
Sure.
Please, yeah.
Right. Can I just keep, because I'm rubbish, this is shocking. So can I literally just keep layering this and just trying to copy the picture?
Absolutely. I'm trying to spot you on the camera. I don't.
Hold on a second. Let me put my camera on.
Oh yeah. There you are. Hi. Hold it up for me. Take a quick look.
It's basic, like 5th year GCSE.
There you are.
No, it's not.
That's brilliant.
So I'd like to keep, working at it. So it won't, even if it dries, you can literally just keep going.
Keep going. Every layer you add will add value. The more layers, the better. So your base coat is always a little bit translucent, and you need a few coats of paint to break through that, and then your colors will really start to pop. So for me, we've only just started this painting with what we've done. Now the foundations are set. We could spend hours if we wanted to, just adding, layering, refining. So
great.
I also have a question. Sorry.
yeah, please.
I'm absolutely hopeless at art. I was very reluctant to hold mine up. I don't know how to get a curve in my wave.
Okay.
How do I make my wave have that curvy look?
Yeah. So the most important kind of feature in the wave is, and I wish I had the picture to kind of hold up to camera, but if you imagine like the arch of the wave where, say, a tiny surfer could surf through, in Victoria's piece, there's almost this heart-shaped blue section in there, and that's like the tunnel through the wave. So you just want to bring in some definition to that.
Okay.
Really aggressively on mine, so I'm going to just use some really dark blue, just so you can pick it up in the camera, but yours I'm sure will be a lot more subtle. But it's this area here that has got this heart shape. There we go. I'll hold that up. This bit.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. I'll give that a go.
Any more questions?
I think the key really, isn't it, Zena? Don't judge yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself around the outcome, because it's an achievement for all of us, because we've spent, precious time away from all of our usual stresses and chores and whatever it is we do on a Saturday morning to do something like this. So don't be too hard on yourself. It's your achievement, and it's something you spent time on, and you can go back to it and use it as like meditation time almost, can't you, Zena?
Yeah, absolutely right. And I always find it really funny, like every class I teach, consistently guests will say, oh, I'm terrible at art, I haven't done it for years, and then they hold it up to camera and it's gorgeous, and there's not often that much variance in people's outcomes. So I'm meant to be a professional artist, and I hold mine up to camera, and it's not all that different to where yours are, and you've all got all these flourishing careers sat alongside this morning's activity. So yeah, I do think it's interesting how much critique there is and an expectation when it doesn't actually prove out in reality.
So true. Everyone who said, oh, mine's rubbish, and they held it up, I was like, wow, if I can create something like that, that's pretty good. And again, we talked about it last time, but it comes back a lot from school days when our teachers were sometimes quite cruel to us. But listen, well done everybody for coming along, and thank you, Zena, for putting all this together, sending us kits, and delivering the class. It was great, and being the DJ after all, all of that. You couldn't even be the DJ today. So yeah, and thank you all for purchasing the masterclass. I really hope you enjoyed it, and please do put your pics in the group. I will do mine when I've finished. I'll start you all off, and just I think a whole idea is to encourage each other, congratulate each other, not to judge ourselves against each other, but just to be a nice group of supportive, with a supportive environment. So have a beautiful rest of the day. It's sun shining, gorgeous day, so please enjoy that, and I'll see some of you later for our 5 o'clock session, those of you who are coming, on the mental and emotional detox with Claudia.